Welcome to the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast featuring mountain home real estate broker Robert Martin, who has over 25 years of experience assisting clients reach their goals and move forward. Tune in each week for a dynamic conversation with experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents that explores the ins, outs, and specific nuances of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home in Evergreen, Conifer, Bailey, and surrounding areas to catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Russ Kottke. Russ is with American Surveying in Conifer, and Russ has been there as long as I can remember. So a lot of knowledge to impart today, we're hopeful, and I'm sure that'll happen. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Russ, your background, and how did you get into surveying and in the position you're in now?
Let's say I actually got into surveying. I started surveying in 1978. I had a cousin who was in the surveying business, and the summer of '78, he asked me to step in or come and help him out a little bit for the summer. Fell in love with it. Went back to Minnesota, that's where I'm from, for a year of schooling, and then came out for good to Colorado in 1978 or 79. Been out here ever since. Got my surveying license here in Colorado in 1988, and then ended up here in the Conifer area in 1992. So I've been with this company since 1992.
Gosh, just a few years before I started in the business, and ever since I've been here, you've been a fixture as far as just touching base and getting information and great data on surveys and information about the specific area. So we're glad to have you on the show today, Russ. So this is kind of a silly question. It seems to be pretty self-explanatory, but why is it important to have a survey prepared for a property that's being purchased in the foothills?
One thing, Robert, I've seen here in the past couple of years, title companies are starting to require them. So, that's the biggest thing, to buy a piece of property up here, you need to get a survey, per the title company requirement. Back when I bought my first house, it was, the biggest investment I've ever made at that time, and it still has been. And I just kind of wanted to know what I was buying, so that to have a survey done, depending on what kind, at least you get an idea of what you're buying. So I think it's pretty important to have a survey.
Yeah, I agree. And what are the most important factors to consider when surveying a property? What should you be looking for when you order a survey, or those types of things that go into that thought process?
There's quite a bit of things that go into there. Again, it all kind of starts with the title company. What type of a survey is the title company wanting? So we take a look at that. And then as the buyer or seller, we get their input, what are they looking for? So we put all of that together. We, from the title company, they give us what's called a title commitment. We go through, take a look at that, see if there's any easements affecting the property. If, the buyer wants to know where a certain easement is, again, depending on what type of survey, at least we can put together a drawing, saying this is where the easement is. And then, once we're out on the ground, we try to walk the property, depending on what type of survey. We'll check for encroachments. That's our biggest thing today. People want to know if the neighbor's house is on their property, or, stuff like that. So there's a lot of thought that goes into that first process there.
Now, the different types of surveys, there are many, or there's certainly choices for buyers or sellers to select from. And what would those be? The difference between like an ILC, which stands for Improvement Location Certificate, and a full-blown survey?
So the ILC, again, is the improvement location certificate. What that is basically, we'll start with a legal description. There's different types of legal descriptions. If you're in a subdivision, there's, that's what's called platted lots. And we get that information from, the plat, and we prepare a drawing off of that. Another type of legal description is what's called a meets and bounds. And, off of the deed or the title commitment, we'll, legal description from it and prepare the drawing based on that. So either way, with an ILC, you'll get, a representation, a drawing of the property. And then we go out onto the ground, try to find 2 or 3 of the property corners and survey those in. With the ILC, we locate what's called major improvements, the house, barn, driveway, if we can, like the well. On ILCs, we don't locate fencing. We could do that if, the client or whoever wants that, we could add that. So the final product is the improvement location certificate, which is a drawing of your property, and on it, we show the improvements. And the next step up from that is what's called a land survey plat. On a land survey plat, we go out to the property and establish all of the property corners of that property. And the next step up is what's called an improvement survey plat. And with the improvement survey plat, we take the ILC and the land survey plat and combine it together. With the ILC, we don't guarantee your boundaries. We always recommend, and again, going back to the title company, they could ask, for a particular type of survey. So depending on what they want, we always recommend to do the improvement survey plat. That way your final product will show your property, but out on the ground, we have established your property corners. So you could take your client out there, walk the property and say, here's your property corner.
So the difference with the ILC is that you don't actually, sometimes the corners are not found. That's why you can't really guarantee the property corners or the property line, so to speak. But with the improvement survey plat, then you actually find the corners, and sometimes you mark those too, and then so you can ensure that you've found the corners and you know where the property lines are.
Yeah, that is correct. And on the improvement survey plat, if we can't find your corner, we establish it. And when I say that, we set a monument today. We set like a 1/2-inch rebar with a plastic cap on it. That plastic cap has my registration number on it, which is helpful. If another surveyor's out there and he sees my cap, he can give me a call and say, found your cap out there. And not only that, but if we have a client call and say, hey, I was out of my property, I found this survey marker out there with this LS number on it, we could help them track down who set that monument.
So that's pretty common then, Russ. If you're, let's say it's a different survey company, they're out and they see your cap on it, or you're out and you see someone else that you're familiar with, and you have a discrepancy or a question, you talk to each other and communicate and try to come to a resolution, which is best for the client.
That is correct. But in surveying, there is no discrepancies. I say that with a smile on my face.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And exactly. But, there is discrepancies out there. And with that information, we do talk to the other surveyor. I like to think, we as surveyors are a pretty close-knit group, especially with the surveyors up here in the local area. I work with them, have been working with them. So it's a pretty good way to say, hey, how come you put your pin there?
And as far as discrepancies, it's just a determination, or is it somewhat objective, or maybe you're off a few feet or or something like that. Is that kind of what you're referencing with discrepancies or
Yeah,
interpretation, so to speak?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And up here in the hills, it's one thing, if we find a monument up here in the hills, and you got to keep in mind to get there, we went up and over a couple hill and dales, and to find a pin within a couple feet, it's like, yes, we're accepting it. But
Yeah. And sometimes, man, the topography that you guys have to traverse is some pretty major stuff. So just to be within, a certain distance is an achievement, I guess. But
yes, it is. It is.
so looking at those different types of survey which you described, Russ, cost is different with each. The ILC being the best value, I guess. But not as detailed. So a range, and I know it depends upon the size and the scope of the work, but a range is quite different. So someone would want to certainly have that defined before they move forward with their work.
Yeah. For us, what we like to do after when a client calls in, it says, I'm looking to have a survey done in this piece of property. We always ask them what kind. They say, well, I don't know. So what we do is once we have, their property, we go through our records to see if we have any information on it, try to put together an estimate, based on that. But the estimate does depend on, how many corners to the property, how big the property is, the terrain. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. ILCs today, they're starting around $600-700. That's like a platted lot in a local subdivision here. Some of the improvement survey plats, shoot, we've been up like, $12,000. So there's quite a bit of range there.
Yeah, for sure. I could see that, it really is dependent upon what you're looking for and the property and all of that. But the good thing is you guys, well, you know what you're doing, and it's great to have that resource and certainly have a high level of confidence in what you guys do. So what is, Russ, over the years that you've been doing your work, what are some of the most common things that you see, the common problems that somebody purchases a property and maybe they come back to you and it's like, oh gosh, the neighbor's shed's on the property or different things like that? Are there some things that stick out to you as far as those things?
It could be the neighbor's shed, the neighbor's driveway. We just have one where it was the neighbor's house. Actually, our house on the neighbor's property. So the biggest thing that, we find is what we call encroachments. If it's a newer home, a newer build, there's less likely of an encroachment. If it's an older place, older subdivision, just over the years, people have, kind of been using the neighbor's property, or we've been using the neighbor's property. So the biggest thing is what we call encroachments.
Yeah. And over the years, what sticks out as one of the craziest or most complicated that you've ever seen?
I would say over the years, the biggest thing is having your house or the neighbor's house on your property. We just had one, a couple months ago where we went out and did the survey, and it was a new build. And sure enough, our house was over on the neighbor's property. They could all be fixed. It's just going through county process, changing lot lines. The types of surveys that I went through are just the basic ones. We could always step into the county, process, and that's a whole different list of surveys. But maybe my memory is slipping, but that's the biggest one I can remember at this time.
No, I hear you there. It's certainly a testament to, before you close on your property, at least having a sense for, like you said, walking the property line, knowing where things are. Sometimes you can determine prior to closing that maybe the neighbor's shed is on the property. And if so, you can have a conversation, and maybe they move it, maybe they don't, you're comfortable with it, what have you. And it also depends upon whether the entity, the lender or whoever's, overseeing the transaction requires something like that to be resolved. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So So when you lived in the foothills, Russ, which you did for many, many years, what did you like most about living here and when you're living in the foothills?
My biggest thing was I could just go home and it was quiet. There was something I loved about the quiet. I could sit out on the deck and listen to the wind blow. I
Well,
just enjoyed the quiet. Not the winds we're getting today, but just to get away, I guess.
I like that. I like that high wind. Sometimes when it's, of course, we've had about 2 weeks of wind that just seemed to have been nonstop, but the high winds blow. I appreciate that as well. Very quiet and serene. And it seems like when people move and live in the area, Russ, they certainly just become a part of the nature, so to speak, at, seeing the wildlife and being outside and just enjoying the serenity. So
Yeah.
if I came to you, Russ, and I was thinking of purchasing a home in the mountains in the foothill community, what might be a few things you'd point out to say, hey, may want to consider doing this, or here's a few things for your due diligence list.
Yeah. And again, me being a surveyor, keep us busy, go out and get a
Yes.
survey. One thing we're seeing more and more these days is after we finish our survey is to have the client or the buyer actually kind of walk the property with us, depending on how big the property is, so figure out what you're buying. Again, when I bought mine, it was my biggest investment. What are you buying? And, the other thing is, what are you looking for? What do you want? Do you want to, have a water and sewer, or do you want to have your own well and septic? There's a lot of things to think about. So, my advice is I would ask you a question, what are you looking for? And, that would be some words, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. As far as certainly want to get a survey and understand, but there are some areas that have community water and sewer systems. Most of the properties are well and septic. And then, fire mitigation is something that's a big part of what we do. Your exposure to the sun, do you get good sun? Are you on the north face? And what kind of complications or does that create moving forward each season? So that's certainly a good way to start, Russ, for sure. So just want to say thanks a lot for your time. Go ahead.
You bet. And I was just going to say, up here in the mountains, that southern exposure is pretty nice.
Yeah, I agree totally. And sometimes, and I've said it before that sometimes, I do mention to buyers that the best time to see a property is in the throes of a snowstorm, so you can really see, what it's like, when the time comes. So, well, thank you very much, Russ. If people would like to get in touch with you, what's the best place to do that, or how best could they accomplish that?
I would just say Google American surveys here in the Conifer area. I think we have a website.
All right. That sounds great. I appreciate it, Russ. Well, thanks a lot for sharing such wonderful information. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great day. Thank you.
To the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast. On the podcast, I interview real estate experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents who enjoy the serenity and lifestyle of living in our mountain communities. Tune in each week for a conversation that explores the ins and outs of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home, and catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.